Alright, so if I seem a little irritated, it's because I am. I just recorded this entire video, and I forgot I had the mic muted in my settings, so none of it counted. Alright, well, we're going over. I'm going to start doing the month-long captains meetings and previous month recaps on the first day of the month. That way I can go have an official recap of the previous month, and in those captains meetings, there's normally nothing special about them other than just showing face. So they're not really necessary. But I do think it's necessary to do a formal recap of the previous month. So we'll do our captain's meeting / recap of the previous month on the first day of the month. If there's any rule changes or rule adjustments, we will do those a couple days prior to the next month. That way it gives anglers time to adjust. If you do a captain's meeting the night before, and if any rules have changed or adjusted, that only gives the anglers a couple hours to figure everything out. If you do it a few days before, now they have a few days to be prepared and not really have any excuses for the upcoming tournaments. So, first thing we're going to do, we do have a couple rule adjustments we're going to make, and I will go over what they were prior and what they're going to be now. And first one we're going to do is the video evidence for underslot fish and slot tournaments. And in our scene is constantly evolving. Things literally happen month to month to where adjustments need to happen. There's so much gray area. We rely on the anglers big time for their honesty. We have a lot of checks and balances on our side. But things literally happen and come up every single month that there may not be a black and white rule written for, and then we have to make a judgment call. And then what I prefer to do is after we make that judgment call, we then put a ruling into the book, as opposed to never update the book, and when this issue comes up again down the road, now we don't have anything to fall back on. We have to make another judgment call. And then you open Pandora's box, because if you don't make the same judgment call twice, people will remember that, and they will call on that experience. So what I'm doing, I'm proactively updating and adjusting our rules every time something new arises. So let's see here. The video evidence. Blue cats and channel cats are pretty easy. Let me pull up our current slot tournament. You need to put the catfish on his side. For blue cats and channel cats, it is mandatory. You have to measure them on their side. This is essentially as good as you can get. This is one of JJ's photos. I think he's one of the only ones with a perfect fish this month. The nose is bumped. It's as straight as you can get it. Like, there's curvature to a catfish. It'll never be perfectly straight. But this is as straight as you can get it. And he always puts the tail straight. This is about as perfect as you can get for a slot fish, max score slot fish. And when you submit your video evidence, you got to show it bumped. You got to show the entire fish bumped. And then I would appreciate it. You don't have to zoom in necessarily, but if you can, slide the tail up and down past that 31.75 mark, just to prove neither tail fin can get past that 31.75 mark. What JJ does for me, and it's awesome, what he does is he'll pinch the tail, he'll slide it up and down that 31.75, so I can clearly see at no point in time with this fish bumped and straight that tail is ever breaking 32 inches. That's how you should do it for channel cats and blues. And if you go down the line here, all the fish are straight tail. Straight tail. And then if you come over to Dan, same thing, straight tail. Right here, straight tail. Your max length is typically achieved with that top tail fin straight in line with the body. So if you can start measuring fish like this, that'd be extremely appreciated. It's not mandatory, but I'm telling you right now, if you have a slot fish like this, and if the video and it's not measured like this or close to like this, and the video evidence doesn't support how I think it should be, it will be DQ'd. We did have to DQ one this month because there was not video evidence to support the picture, and I thought more length could have been taken. So I am much, much more strict on the slot fish rules. And I'll be right back. I'm going to let my dog in. He is barking. On to measuring flatheads in the slot tournament. So the difficulty with measuring flatheads is I personally prefer all flatheads get measured on their bellies. You can measure them on their sides if you want. It's just that's not good for the fish. I would prefer all flatheads get measured on their bellies. And real quick, channel cats and blue cats have to be measured on their side. There's no other option. You cannot measure them on their belly in a slot tournament. If you measure them on their belly in an open tournament, fine. You're costing yourself length, though. And just to let you know, a blue cat or channel cat on their belly is going to measure shorter. It's fact. It measures shorter on their belly. Flatheads, not so much. And if you put a flathead on its side, you're actually causing it stress, more stress than needed. So flatheads, I'm asking you to measure on their belly if you can. Blue cats and channel cats must be measured on their side. But over to flatheads, this is a perfect video of a 31.75 inch flathead. I had one from JJ last month. If you can, try and flatten that tail out completely, but that's not always possible with flatheads. And this is a perfect example of a case where the tail is up, and I'll run through some things on why it's perfect. And yeah, this is Clint Seeger's 31.75 video. So right here you can see flathead straight. You can essentially draw a straight line from the bump nose. You can clearly see it's bumped. And if you went into Microsoft Paint and drew a straight line, it's about as perfect as you can get. This fish could not be much more straight across this board.
Proof that I can't get him further than 31.75, sorry.
Here's what's crucial about the flathead photo. You can tell he never moved it, and now he's zooming in on the tail. This is where it gets tricky for judging without video evidence.
So, I'm not doing anything to him, I'm not stretching him, he's against the bump. And I think I got him to 31.
So right here, real quick, if we pause it, the tail touching the board is 31.75. However, the angle of the tail not touching the board is 32.25. Sometimes anglers will intentionally not have the tail flat, and they will take a picture closer to the nose, and that tail fin being up gives the optical illusion that that fish is longer than it actually is. This is not a 32.25 inch fish. This is 31.75, and you'll see here in a second.
75. That part of the tail there is up.
Now you can see that the part of the tail that's up is straight across, but it gets even better.
In the air, the part that's touching the board is right now at 31.5, but I'm going to submit him at 31.75 with the photo that I have. I can't get him past that. Again, that piece of the tail.
So that angle would have been better if he was farther up, but he has an even better angle to prove that doesn't break 32.
Is up in the air and not touching.
Right here. This is a direct shot above going straight down. That tail fin is up, and it's clearly not breaking 32. This fish is a 31.75 fish. If you push this tail flat down, it would actually be even shorter. When you push a flathead's tail down, it actually decreases length just slightly. So the fact that this is beneath that 32 inch mark, while raised, is even more proof that it can't break 32 if it was flat against the board.
32 at all. See?
So this right here supports his 31.75 picture. But the problem is, it's dang near impossible with a flathead sometimes to get their tail to stay completely flat and get that picture standing up. That tail sometimes is going to bounce up. So there's a chance on that photo that the tail fin not flat against the board gives it the appearance of longer than 32 when everything around this fish says it's not 32 inches. And our rules say we will judge based on the farthest length touching the board. And right here, this is that farthest length touching the board. This is not a 32 inch fish, it's 31.75. Anyone who thinks it's any longer, I don't know. Maybe they're just being ignorant of the video, but that's a 31.75 fish. This is textbook what we want to see with your video evidence on your 31.75 fish or your underslot fish. We also updated a rule. Video evidence was optional on max slot limit fish. It is now mandatory. If you submit a 31.75 inch fish, or if you submit a max slot limit fish in any tournament going forward, it is mandatory. Just take that video evidence and send it to me, because if you are in the cache, you will be required to send me that video evidence. You cannot stretch it past. You cannot get it past that 32-inch mark. A lot of max fish get caught. They actually do a lot more than I thought. So we made it optional, and I was going to call on people to send it if it became not an issue, but if it became a judgment call. Everyone was actually sending it to me ahead of time for the most part, but since it's so prevalent, it's now mandatory. If you catch a 31.75-inch fish and you're submitting it at 31.75, it is mandatory now. You have to supplement that with video evidence, send it to me via Facebook. It's just I'm gonna be a lot more strict with the slot tournaments because this is my baby. No one else is doing this in the catfish world, and I think this is the most fair format out there for anglers across the nation. And I'm going to be as black and white as humanly possible as I can. So it is now mandatory going forward in May. If you have a max slot limit fish, you have to submit video evidence. And we as judges are to the point now where, somebody might think that, well, maybe they'll try and make a 31.75-inch fish 31.5. Trust me, we're going to know. It's painstakingly obvious when you try and shorten a fish. So I've seen literally thousands of fish at this point. Be honest, and if I have any question whatsoever, I'm just going to DQ it. And that's how we are on the slot tournaments. Next for the slot tournaments, this is not a slot tournament fish. However, it was submitted in the open, and I think it's a great example of why I'm making this rule adjustment for slot tournaments only. If you're using the Rapala 60-inch board, and if you're fishing a slot tournament, you must have it mounted to a piece of hard surface 2 inches wider both directions of the Rapala board. If this is a perfect slot fish if it was submitted to a slot tournament. It wasn't, but if it was, 31.75. However, if you were a competitor in a slot tournament and this fish was submitted as is as a perfect score, there would be a lot of questions. And there's no way I, in good conscience, could approve this fish as is in a slot tournament. In an open tournament, don't care. He could be costing himself a little bit of length here. Doesn't matter. It's an open tournament. If you're going to mount your Rapala board to a thinner piece of wood and the tail fin is going to fall off and you're going to lose a little length, that's completely on you. It's an open tournament. There's no handicapping. I mean, it's mounted. It's straight. It's a legal fish. 31.75 stands all day in an open tournament. If this was a slot tournament fish, though, there's no way, even probably with video evidence, that I could allow this fish because there's no way to prove that this fish is actually 31.75 inches because it's just too small. It's just too small of a board. So going forward, if you use the Rapala board in a slot tournament in the national scene, it must be mounted to a hard surface 2 inches wider both directions because we can't have the tail spilling off like this in a slot tournament. Again, if the gentleman watching this who submitted this photo, he's fishing the open, completely fine. There's no issue with this in the open tournament. But if you're going to fish in the slot tournament with this same exact board, it must be mounted wider because we cannot have the spillover like this in a slot tournament. This is too much gray. We can't have this much gray. There's got to be a little more black and white. But Rapala is the only company right now that has a cheap board, so I don't want to force people to get the catch or the musky bumper. However, you also got to work with me a little bit and get that mounted a little better for slot tournaments only. All right. Next one, we're going to pick on Stan here a little bit. Our current rule set, this is a legal fish because in our current rule set, you just have to visually be able to see one entire length of the fish, which you visually can see one entire length of the fish here. The reason that rule was made that way was the identifier, every now and then the identifier will be sitting on top. Like people, I do it all the time. I just place my identifier on the fish. The fish is kind of sticky, and I use the Ziploc bags. It kind of sticks to the fish. It's nice. So I just place it on top. However, every now and then the identifier will cut off the top or bottom of the fish, and the old rule said the entire length of the fish both ways had to be visible, and I changed that because by rule, if you have your identifier on the fish, you'd be breaking that rule, so I changed it to 1. That way your identifier can be sitting on the fish and maybe cutting off the top or bottom, and it would still be legal. Hindsight's 2020. Now I have a photo like this, and it's technically a legal photo, but we also can't be accepting in the future. This is for this tournament for April. It's accepted. Um, if someone else doesn't like it, you kind of gotta get over it because it's a legal photo in this tournament. However, in the future, this would not be accepted. This would be a 100% DQ because the rules are going to be in May. The entire fish must be visible. You can still lay your identifier on top. The identifier can be cut enough, part of it, top, bottom, don't care. But the entire circumference of the fish must be visible in photos going forward. If any of the fish is cut off, and that includes the tail. So let's say you saw the entire circumference of this fish, and this was submitted as is, and this tail down here was cut off, it's getting DQ'd. 100% of the fish must be visible in the photo while they're laying on their side. Sorry, Stan, to pick on you, but you had the example, and we are being proactive with these rule adjustments as opposed to, letting this sit, and then maybe somebody questions it, and then down the road it happens again. Like, we're going to be proactive in this scene and make adjustments as they come to make things more black and white down the road, as opposed to just leaving things gray and people constantly, asking me questions here, 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 here. So that's that rule adjustment. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is mothershipping. In a kayak fishing competition, front to back needs to be only from the kayak. You launch your kayak from your vehicle, and it has to be launched from the shore. You launch your kayak from your vehicle from the shore. And then you do all of your fishing in your kayak, and then when you are done, your kayak can now go back onto your vehicle. At no point in time can you be mothershipped to a fishing spot by any other vessel. You cannot be mothershipped to a fishing spot by another kayak. You cannot throw your kayak into a boat and drive to a fishing spot in your boat. 100% of your trip has to be kayak front to back. There is no mothershipping in between. Now, if you're fishing with somebody, and if you guys get to a spot together and you want a mothership there, that's fine. If you want to tie off to each other and fish in the same spot, that's fine. I don't really care if you want to tie off to each other. There's no difference between anchoring a foot away from each other and tying off to each other. Maybe somebody has GPS spot lock, and it's the conditions aren't that safe, so you want to tie off to each other. That's fine. I don't want anglers to be forced to be put in bad situations or forced to be fishing solo, etc. That's fine. If you want to tie off to each other while you're fishing, that's fine. But you can't be towing each other. You cannot be mothershipping to spots, and you cannot be using any other form of transportation to get to your spot. A kayak fishing competition is only from the kayak, nothing in between. And those are the rule adjustments that were made, and some points that I wanted to make going into May. All right, everyone, best of luck in May. We got a lot of events going on, and the captain's meeting will be May 1st, and the recap of the April tournaments will be on May 1st as well. All right, Kayak Mike out of here.